Your Excellencies, good afternoon. Your Excellency President Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Madam Amina Mohamed, Your Excellency Colin Kapele, President of ECOSOC, Your Excellency, and very hardworking, my sister Aled Sudan Arnaud, Minister of Environment, Sustainable Development of the Republic of Congo, and outstanding chair of the Bureau of the Forum. Commissioner Joseph Asako, representing the African Union, the Minister of Finance of Rwanda and our partner in the last 2 years, Minister Uziel, the Vice President of the African Development Bank, distinguished ambassadors, the private sector, members and representatives of major groups and other stakeholders, members of the different mayors and cities around the continent, the youth, and of course, all the members of the UN family. It is a great pleasure and an honor to be with you here today at the 8th African Regional Forum for Sustainable Development, which we commonly call the United Nations Party in Africa. Once again, let me start by expressing my profound gratitude to the government and the people of Rwanda for so warmly welcoming and hosting us in this beautiful land of 1,000 hills. We want to thank in person and personally President Kagame for agreeing to have us host this session here today. As we all know, coming out of COVID, very, very difficult to come together. The last time we were together like this was in Victoria Falls. And when we left, barely 3 weeks after that, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and we have not been able to hold and meet as we have met today. So again, thank you so much to the government of Rwanda. Normally when we come to these gatherings, we start by talking about all the ills that happen on the continent and everything that befalls us. But I think I'm going to turn around a little bit and let's talk about some of the big wins that we have had and why these big wins are important for us as we go forward. Of course, we meet in the context of COVID-19 in an environment, and somebody has some slides that they're going to put up, in an environment that is very challenging. And there has been a lot of concern about where Africa meets and where Africa will begin to move from after the pandemic. The reason we are here today, and this is the best success, and the first one that I would mention as we go forward, is the success that Africa has had on COVID-19. We are here today because we are standing in a country that has vaccinated more than 70% of its population. This is an important fact because Africa will not open and our economies will not recover if we do not vaccinate. The conversations in most forums like this is about vaccine appetite. But when we stand here today, we talk about vaccine success. Rwanda has been able to get the vaccines, and Rwanda has been able to use the vaccines. So it is not an impossibility that Africa totally can get the vaccines and use the vaccines. And I think as we continue our conversations and as we talk about meeting Agenda 2030 and how we do that, we must look to our continent for the successes that we want to emulate and that we must demonstrate. However, unfortunately, as we stand here today, when we average and aggregate Africa, and I don't know, there's a slide that's going to go up somewhere, only 17% of Africans are vaccinated. We have about 53% of African countries that have vaccines in country that are not being used. The question then is, why not? Is Africa willing to stand apart from the rest of the world as we recover? And we know the answer is no, because we're all here today to talk about how we get to Agenda 2030 and the Africa we want in Agenda 2063. So we can win this battle. We can win by looking at our neighbors, the 7 countries on the continent that have managed to vaccinate, succeeded in vaccinating 70% of their population. And that's the first win that I would like to talk about, or at least put my conversation within. The second one, again, coincidentally, because it was not planned, has Rwanda in its title. And that is the agreement that has been arrived at in Nairobi, which essentially begins to handle plastic and plastic waste. And the Deputy Secretary General just came from Nairobi, where this conversation has been raving. When we talk about plastic waste, everybody wonders, why are we worried about plastic waste? What are the numbers? But let me just give you some sense of the statistics again on plastic waste. Plastic production rose from 2 million tons in 1950 to 348 million tons in 2017, becoming a global industry of $522 billion. That's what we're talking about. This is the economy of the plastics industry. This is the economy that 2 countries in the world managed to say, we need to stop this, and we can do it. And those 2 countries that started that conversation were Rwanda and Peru. So again, Africa is in the news. Africa is winning, and Africa can win. And I think if we remember this as we talk and manage to steer our way through this difficult quadruple pandemic that we're going through, which is a pandemic of health, of course our economies, climate change, and now today when we all wake up, a war in Europe. We must know that as Africans, if we set our minds to it, all it takes is the first step. I'm sure many years ago when we came to Rwanda and saw that there were no plastics, and those of us who were bringing gifts back to Rwanda in duty-free bags and got stopped at the airport wondered whether this would persist. Mr. President, we must thank you for your leadership. It has persisted. And not only has it persisted in Rwanda, 200 countries signed the agreement, despite all of the petrochemical industry, a $1 trillion industry, going up against the agreement. I think this is the power of partnerships, which is one of the goals that the AFRSD is talking about. Now the next positive, which again has Rwanda written on it, but Africa and partnerships written on it, is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. When we talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, everybody wonders, why are we doing it, and how do we get out of the morass that we are in today? And why are we talking about this when we are all suffering, as they say, from a debt burden, and we are not able to finance our economies? It is 2022 and Africa is still standing. We have not yet had one African economy go into a full-blown debt crisis. I think when we started the discussions around the COVID-19 pandemic, and we were meeting so many times with ministers of finance and Minister Uzi and ministers of health, we were all waiting for what was going to be the first African country that will declare insolvency, meaning they cannot pay their debt anymore. They cannot meet their international obligations. That has not happened. One of the reasons that has not happened is Africa came together. And in the 2 years of COVID-19, Africa has traded more with itself than it has in the 5 years before COVID-19. Essentially because Africa had to rely on itself to begin to trade PPEs. Everybody became an SME PPE producer. The Nigerians were trading across West Africa, the Kenyans were trading across East Africa, the South Africans were taking care of the Southern African market, and the Moroccans and the Egyptians were taking over the North African market. That was Africa at its best. That is the Africa of the CFTA. That is the dream that we all, again, in Kigali, Mr. President, saw come alive as we signed the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. When we talk about it, I think it seems like a very far-off dream and a very far-off possibility, but not very far away from Africa in East Asia, which we always look to emulate. During this crisis, East Asia has grown fastest. East Asia's GDP is expected to reach $39 trillion by 2023. They have grown from $33 trillion in 2020 when COVID-19 started. So in the 3 years of COVID-19, or in the 2 years of COVID-19, they have actually exceeded the growth of the Americas, of Europe, and of course, of the Middle East. This is because they're trading much more with each other. They're trading faster with each other. They have built global supply chains inside East Asia that are allowing them not only to look internally for demand and consumption and savings, but also now to begin to supply the rest of the world as supply chains coming from our traditional partners are being disrupted. Africa can do the same, and Africa must be the same. The Economic Commission for Africa just finished a study that showed that actually for us to leave the dream of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, we need about 2.2 million trucks running on our streets, going from Cape to Cairo, going from Dakar to Djibouti. 2.2 million trucks. If 2 drivers a truck, that's 4 million jobs we will create with the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. But then we also need to produce the trucks. In Rwanda, we produce cars, Mr. President, we can produce the trucks. In Morocco, we produce cars. Of course, in South Africa, we produce cars. So Africa does have the ingredients of how to do this. And this is what Agenda 2030 is about. This is why we're standing here today, is what kind of partnership can the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement deliver for us so that we actually get to where we need to get to and create the jobs that need to be created. Of course, as we talk about the SDGs and we talk about education, which is one of the SDGs which we'll be talking about, we start asking ourselves, what kind of education? We have been looking a lot at the wars on the continent or on the wars outside the continent. But something has been happening very quietly that we have not seen. I'm sure many of you have not even noticed. In the last 3 days, huge, massive change in the technology industry. Microsoft acquired an industry called Activision. It's a $200 billion gaming industry. $200 billion. This is where our youth see the future. And that's when you say that we are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for with $200 billion. The question, Your Excellency, is still today the policies on our continent do not allow our youth to develop their applications, grow them on the continent, use them on the continent, monetize them on the continent. Every day we have some youth on the continent selling an idea to Google, to Microsoft, or to Cisco. If we continue to do that, what Microsoft has been able to do will never happen on the continent. Waking up one morning and being the largest gaming industry or the largest owner of a gaming industry in the world at $200 billion. With the population Europe has, Africa is going to be the consumer of those games that are being produced by Microsoft. But there are African kids in all of our capitals, in all of our villages, that certainly can do that. The question is, under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, Your Excellency, can we create a global mutualized setting for African youth? You are in Kigali leading the way with the Innovation Center and the Innovation port that you're building, a free zone. Can we bring together all the intellectual property? Yes, we're all talking about intellectual property for the COVID-19 vaccine. And I think at the very least, it has done us good because we understand the importance of intellectual property. But intellectual property for our youth is even more important in the digital and technological space. Rwanda today has 34% of its population that has access to the internet. Overall on the continent, we're at about 17%. We can do more, we can do better. Again, by investing in infrastructure, by investing in the broadband that is needed, by investing in access that is needed. That is why we're coming together with ITU, with UN Women, with UNFPA, to see whether we can put in place different centers, digital centers for coding for women in particular, because as we talk about education, we need the women. And women creating their own jobs, creating jobs for themselves is really what the SDG 14, meeting SDG 5 on gender is about. And we hope, under your leadership, Mr. President, that we will be able to take the continent to that place where every girl on the continent can have access to the internet at affordable prices and deliver, why not, a different Microsoft for the continent at $200 billion a ton. And finally, on climate change, as the last point of this conversation, I just want to thank our outgoing chair, and as she hands the baton to our incoming chair of Rwanda, the COP27 is going to be our COP. It is going to be Africa's COP. The other win that we must take to Sharm el-Sheikh is not a win that says Africa did not cause climate change or is not responsible for climate change, so somebody needs to help us. It has to be a win that says Africa is sequestering 3 years of carbon emissions. If Africa was not sequestering 3 years of carbon emissions, we would have passed the 1.5 mark by now. Africa is protecting the world, but Africa needs to be compensated justly through market mechanisms. If we get compensated, as Madam Minister has been talking about and has been leading the fight over the last year, not at $5 a ton of carbon, as we are now taking in Kenya and other African countries, but at 50 tons or 75 tons per carbon, we can create 360 million jobs. We can get $3 trillion off of our carbon because we are saving the world. This is the victory that Africa needs to take to Sharm el-Sheikh. We must put a price to carbon, because by putting a price to carbon, because we have been good, because we have protected our environment, because we have, and as I close, my last sentence is, as I was landing in Rwanda, and same for most of you, we saw the greenery of the villages and the rural areas, and I thought, wow, it must be planting season. I'm going to ask for corn. And then I reached and I called the minister and I said, it is planting season, can I have corn? And he said, no, we're not expecting rain. Nobody has planted because this is an unexpected rainfall. So rain is supposed to come in 1 month, and we will only plant in 1 month. So even as we see it and as we look at our environment around us and they look as if that's how they are meant to be, we are living with climate change. And we cannot continue to live with this climate change without asking for the rest of the world to acknowledge we have protected our environment for this long and deserve, and not asking, not begging, but deserve and require a market mechanism that would allow us to monetize what we have preserved for the rest of the world in such a way that we can continue to grow our economies. The developed world economies are growing. The East Asian economies are growing. In most of the world, COVID is done. In Africa, we can certainly put COVID to rest by doing 3 things. 1, beginning to vaccinate as we can. 2, beginning to ensure that our youth and our women have access to the technology that COVID has shown us is important to keep our economies open. 3, ensuring that we make the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement a reality in its action, because that reality in its action will require the kinds of investments that will make sure that no African country falls into insolvency, even as we battle the COVID crisis. And finally, the partnerships. As we battle wars in Ukraine, we know that energy prices are going to go up on our continent, but in some countries they will go up and in others they will go down. A mutual conversation around wheat, and where we have more wheat on the continent and where we have less wheat. As we talk today, because the CFTA is not working, there are countries with wheat that's rotting and countries that need wheat that are importing from Ukraine at 7 times the price. We are living in a crisis on wheat as we have never seen since 2008. And those of us who were around in 2008 saw the crisis of grain that led to another conflict across the world, actually, and particularly in Africa. So we hope that as we talk about partnerships, the last of the SDGs that we're really putting as an umbrella on all of the rest, life in the sea, education, women, partnerships brings us together, but first partnerships on the continent, and we have the partnership tool in the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and we hope that we can use that to deliver not only on the SDGs, but on Agenda 2063. Thank you for your attention.